Let us begin with the mechanics of the act. Not the psychology, not yet, just the physics. You stand at the threshold of your apartment. You step inside. You grab the cold brass of the door handle. You pull. The heavy wood swings shut, cutting off the light from the hallway. Then you turn the thumb turn of the deadbolt. Click. It is a small sound, a sharp, metallic snap. In the grand cacophony of the universe, it measures close to 0 decibels. But in the timeline of your sanity, that sound is a thunderclap. It marks the precise boundary between the world and the void. Take a moment. Breathe in. The air in here is different, isn't it? It is recycled. It is stagnant. It smells of dust, old fabric, and you. It smells entirely of you. For the first few hours, this is paradise. This is what you wanted. You are escaping the overstimulation of the modern era. Out there, beyond the wood and the drywall, is the chaos, the traffic, the demands of your boss, the performative smiles you have to wear like a mask, the social friction that grinds your nerves down to a fine powder. Out there, you are prey to the noise. But in here, you are the god of a small square universe. You take off your coat. You sit on the couch. You stare at the ceiling. The silence feels like a cool bandage on a fresh burn. You tell yourself, I am safe. I am protected. I am alone. And that is the first lie. Let's analyze that word, alone. Biologically, human beings are not designed for this. We are primates. We are pack animals who survived the Ice Age not because we were strong, but because we were together. Our brains, that 3-pound mass of electrified jelly floating in your skull, evolved specifically to process social data. It craves faces, it craves voices, it creates micro-expressions and body language. It is a machine built to calculate its position within a tribe. So when you lock that door, when you voluntarily sever the connection to the tribe, you are not just relaxing, you are initiating a starvation sequence. Look around the room, really look at it. The chair in the corner, the stack of books, the unwashed coffee mug. Right now, these are just objects. They are familiar. They are comforting. But observe them closely. In the absence of external input, these objects are about to change. Right now, your brain is still running on the momentum of the day. It is still processing the echo of the traffic, the last conversation you had, the song you heard in the elevator. You are running on residual social energy. But that tank is small, and it is leaking. What happens when the tank dries out? What happens when the brain, desperate for a signal, starts to amplify the only data it has left? The room is silent, or so you think. Listen closer. Can you hear the hum of the refrigerator compressor? It's a low 60-cycle thrum. Usually, your brain filters this out as background noise. But now, with nothing else to compete with it, that hum begins to grow. It becomes a texture. It becomes a presence. Listen to the settling of the building, the pipes expanding in the walls. Creak, tap, tap. You are secure in your fortress, but you have forgotten the oldest rule of siege warfare. A fortress keeps the enemy out, yes, but it also keeps the occupants in. And if the siege lasts long enough, the occupants don't die from the arrows outside. They die from what happens inside the walls. They die from the stagnation. You have locked the door. The cabin fever protocol has begun. You just don't feel the symptoms yet. You think you are resting, but your mind is already beginning to panic.
Let's talk about addiction. You probably think of addiction in terms of chemicals, narcotics, alcohol, nicotine. But the most powerful addiction you have is to input. Your brain is a biological processor that runs on a constant stream of data. Every second of your life, until this moment, you have been bombarded. Light, color, motion, conversation, the complex mathematics of navigating a sidewalk, the subtle decoding of a stranger's tone of voice. Your neurons are used to a high-voltage current. They are used to the noise. So what happens when you cut the wire? It is now hour 12 of your isolation. The novelty of the quiet evening has evaporated. You have scrolled through your phone until the screen blurred, but that is digital sugar, not nutritional sustenance. You put the phone down, you look at the wall, and the withdrawal begins. Inside your skull, a panic alarm is tripping. It is called the reticular activating system, the RAS. Think of it as the bouncer at the door of your consciousness. Its job is to filter out the useless garbage. When you are in a busy cafe, the RAS ignores the hum of the espresso machine, so you can focus on your friend's voice. It suppresses the boring data. But in isolation, there is no voice. There is no focus. The environment is low stimulus. The RAS gets confused. It assumes something is wrong. It assumes that because it cannot hear anything, the predator must be stalking you silently. So it does the only thing it knows how to do to keep you alive. It opens the floodgates. It turns the volume knob in your head from a 5 to a 10. This is why the silence stops being peaceful and starts being heavy. It is not that the room is getting louder. It is that your brain is amplifying the microscopic. Suddenly you become hyper-aware of the biological machine you're trapped inside. You can hear the wet, rhythmic squish of your own heart pumping blood through your carotid artery. Thump, squish, thump, squish. It sounds like footsteps in a muddy hallway, but the hallway is your ear canal. You swallow, and it sounds like a thunder crack. You can feel the friction of your eyelids sliding over your corneas when you blink. The external world begins to warp, too. That refrigerator compressor we mentioned, it's no longer a hum. It is a drone. It has a pitch. It has a malicious intent. You find yourself staring at the vent on the wall, convinced you can hear the air moving through the ducts. You can hear the house settling, the wood groaning under the weight of the roof. Why does this feel so painful? Why does boredom feel like a physical ache in your chest? Because boredom is not passivity. Boredom is an evolutionary whip. In the wild, if a primate sat still for too long, staring at a rock, it died, it starved, or it was eaten. So nature installed a fail-safe. When you lack stimulation, your brain releases a chemical cocktail of distress signals. It creates anxiety. It creates agitation. It creates a phantom itch beneath your skin. It is screaming at you. Move. Do something. Find new data. But you can't move. You are in the cabin. You are in the box. so the energy has nowhere to go. It begins to ricochet inside your skull. You stand up. You sit down. You walk to the kitchen. You open the fridge. You stare at the light. You close it. You walk back to the couch. You sit down. You are looping. You are a tiger pacing in a concrete zoo enclosure, wearing a path into the floor. The sanctuary is dissolving. The walls are no longer protecting you from the world. They are reflecting your own neural static back at you. And then you notice the time. You check your watch, sure that an hour has passed since you last looked, but it has only been 7 minutes.
Nature abhors a vacuum. This is a law of physics, but it is also the supreme law of your psychology. Your occipital lobe, the part of the brain responsible for vision, is terrifyingly creative. It does not like blank canvases. If you stare at a plain beige wall for 20 minutes without blinking, the wall will not stay beige. Your brain, desperate for pattern, starved for edge detection, will begin to generate static. It will synthesize color. This is the Ganzfeld Effect in action, the prisoner's cinema. You are lying on the couch. The room is dim. You look at the jacket hanging on the door hook. It is just leather and fabric. You know this. But the silence has gone on too long. The shadows in the corner of the room seem to deepen, to pool like black water. And then, movement. It is just a flicker, a twitch in your peripheral vision. Your head snaps toward the door. Nothing, just the jacket. But for a split second, a fraction of a heartbeat, your brain didn't see a jacket. It saw a silhouette. It saw a shoulder hunched in anticipation. It saw a person standing there, watching you sleep. This is pareidolia gone rogue. Your evolution wired you to recognize faces in the grass to avoid predators. Now that same software is scanning the texture of your ceiling, the grain of the wood floor, the folds of the curtains, and it is finding eyes looking back at you. You blink. You rub your face. You tell yourself to get a grip. I am just tired, you whisper. But are you? This brings us to the second casualty of the cabin: time. In the outside world, time is a rigid grid. It is enforced by external cues: the sunrise, the traffic report, the lunch break, the closing bell. We outsource our internal clock to society. But in here, inside the box, the sun is just a suggestion behind the blinds. Day and night stop being opposites and start to bleed into a single gray smear. You sleep for what feels like 8 hours, only to wake up and realize it has been 45 minutes. You stay awake for days, or is it hours, staring at the ceiling fan spinning, round and round, a hypnotic pendulum that measures nothing. You experience temporal disorientation. The question, "What time is it?" loses its meaning. The terrifying question becomes, "When is it?" Did you eat lunch? You look at the sink. There is a plate there. Did you put it there 10 minutes ago, or was that yesterday? The memory is fuzzy, like a corrupted video file. Without the emotional anchor of interaction, your memories fail to save correctly to the hard drive. And then comes the cruelest trick of all, the auditory phantom. You are sitting in the absolute silence, reading the same paragraph of a book for the 10th time, and suddenly, ring! You hear your phone vibrate against the table. The sound is distinct. Bzzzt! You lunge for it. Your heart leaps. A connection, a signal from the tribe. You grab the black rectangle. The screen is dark. No notifications, no missed calls, no messages. It was a hallucination. Your auditory cortex was so hungry for a human voice that it played a recording of a phone ringing just to see if you would react, just to verify that you are still alive. You put the phone down. The silence rushes back in heavier than before. And now you start to wonder, if the ring wasn't real, is the room real? Are you real?
Let's dismantle the ego. Who are you, really? You define yourself by your job, your clothes, your witty remarks at dinner parties. But sociologists have a darker theory. You are a performance. You are an actor on a stage, and your sanity depends entirely on the presence of an audience. We brush our teeth, comb our hair, and stand upright because we anticipate the gaze of the other. We are maintaining the costume. But in the cabin, in the deep isolation, the audience has left the building. The theater is empty. The lights are off. And so the actor stops pretending. It happens slowly. First, the clothes. Why wear jeans? They are restrictive, hard, unforgiving. You switch to sweatpants, then pajamas, then the same pajamas for 3 days in a row. Why change? Who is checking the continuity of this scene? No one. Then the hygiene rituals collapse. The shower becomes a monumental task. The water feels too loud, too abrasive. The effort to scrub a body that no one will see seems mathematically illogical. You catch a glimpse of yourself in the hallway mirror. Your hair is greasy. Your eyes are dull, lacking that spark you usually manufacture for social interaction. You smell stale, like old sheets and recycled air. You are reverting. You are shedding the civilized shell to reveal the raw, efficient primate underneath. But the primate is lonely. And this is where the silence becomes too much to bear. Your Broca's area, the speech center of the brain, is itching. It wants to form words. It wants to vibrate the vocal cords. So you start to narration. At first, it is functional. You mutter to yourself while searching for a spoon. Where is it? Ah, there it is. Did I turn off the stove? Yes. This is normal. This is just your brain running a diagnostic test on your auditory system. It is creating a feedback loop. By speaking and hearing your own voice, you are physically proving to yourself that you still exist. You are using sound waves to map your own reality, like a bat using echolocation in a dark cave. But as the days bleed into weeks, the monologue shifts. It mutates. You are no longer just narrating, you are consulting. You drop a glass, it shatters. You don't just swear, you ask a question. Why did you do that? And then you pause. You stand there in the kitchen, surrounded by broken glass, and you wait. You are waiting for an answer. The silence stretches out.
And for a terrifying moment, you feel like the answer is right there, hovering on the tip of a tongue that isn't yours. The grammar of your thoughts begins to fracture. You stop thinking in terms of I am hungry, I am tired. You start thinking in terms of we. What should we do now? How are we going to get out of this? This is the birth of the fractured self. The isolation has split you in two, the observer and the participant. You are becoming your own roommate, because the alternative, being truly, completely alone, is simply too terrifying for your mind to accept. You are populating the empty room with the only ghost available, a distorted version of yourself. We tend to romanticize isolation as a time for melancholy. We imagine the lonely poet looking out the window, sighing at the rain, a quiet, gray sadness. But the reality of the cabin is not gray. It is red. It is violent. You are not just bored. You are a nuclear reactor that has lost its coolant. The energy inside you, the kinetic potential meant for hunting, for working, for navigating the tribe, is still being generated, but it has nowhere to go. The valve is welded shut. So the pressure builds, and then the chemistry fails. Your brain is running low on serotonin. It is starving for dopamine. These are the neurotransmitters that act as the brakes on your emotional car. They keep you civilized. They tell you, it's okay, calm down, it's just a minor inconvenience. But without the brakes, the car accelerates into the wall. Let's visualize the moment. It is Tuesday, or maybe Friday. You are making toast, a simple mechanical task. You reach for the butter knife. Your hand slips. The knife falls. Clatter. It hits the floor. A tiny strip of butter smears onto the linoleum. In the real world, this is a nothing event, a 2-second cleanup. But here, in the pressure cooker, it is an act of war. You stare at the knife, and suddenly you feel a sensation starting at the base of your spine. It is a physical heat. It rushes up your back, into your neck, flooding your face. Your jaw clamps shut so hard your teeth ache. Your vision narrows until all you can see is that knife. You don't just feel annoyed. You feel a rage so white-hot, so pure, that it frightens you. You want to scream until your throat bleeds. You want to pick up the toaster and hurl it through the closed window. You want to put your fist through the drywall just to feel the crunch of the plaster, just to impact the physical world, just to prove that you can still change your environment. This is the Torrance effect. Why does this happen? Because without social context, your brain loses its sense of scale. When you are surrounded by people, you are constantly calibrating your reactions. If you drop a knife in a restaurant, you don't scream, because the social cost would be too high. The herd would judge you. The shame keeps you in check. But here, there is no herd. There is no judgment. There is no cost. The civilized pilot has died in the cockpit. The animal has taken the controls. The amygdala, the lizard brain, is now dictating policy. It sees the dropped knife not as an accident, but as a threat. It perceives the inanimate object as an enemy that is mocking you. So you stand there, vibrating with adrenaline, fists clenched, ready to fight a piece of cutlery. The silence of the room mocks you. The hum of the fridge sounds like laughter. And in that moment of blind fury, you realize something terrifying. You are not afraid of the monsters outside anymore. You are afraid of what you are capable of doing to this room. You are afraid of what you might do to yourself. The rage subsides. The adrenaline crash leaves you hollow. You are lying on the floor, or the bed, or the couch. It doesn't matter anymore. Gravity feels twice as strong as it did yesterday. Now begins the most dangerous phase of the isolation protocol. The starvation is over. The feeding has begun. But since there are no new memories to consume, since today looks exactly like yesterday, the mind turns inward. It activates the default mode network, but in a corrupted, hyper-aggressive state. It becomes a scavenger. It descends into the basement of your hippocampus, cracks open the filing cabinets, and starts dragging the bodies into the light. This is the autocannibalism of the psyche. Your mind begins to eat itself. You might hope for nostalgia. You might pray that your brain will replay the greatest hits of your life. The first kiss, the graduation, the warm summers on the beach. But that is not how the survival machine works. Happiness is soft. Happiness is low voltage. It doesn't stimulate the neurons enough to cut through the silence. Pain, however, pain is high voltage. Shame is electric. Regret is a siren that never runs out of battery. So the projector starts whirring. The cinema of the mind lights up. And the feature presentation is every mistake you have ever made. It starts small. Do you remember that awkward thing you said at a dinner party 5 years ago? The way the conversation stopped? The way they looked at you? You play the scene. You cringe. You try to push it away. But there are no distractions here. There is no phone to scroll. There is no work to do. There is nowhere to look but at the screen. So you watch it again and again. You analyze the tone of your voice. You rewrite the script. I should have said this. Why didn't I say that? You are rewriting a history that is already carved in stone. Then the projector digs deeper. It finds the real heavy hitters, the relationship you destroyed because you were too proud to apologize, the career opportunity you let slip through your fingers because you were afraid, the last words you said to someone who is now dead, and the realization that those words weren't, "I love you." In the normal world, we bury these things under the noise of daily life. We stay busy to keep the ghosts in the grave. But here, you have handed them a shovel. The clarity is excruciating. In the silence, you can see the causal links of your life with terrifying precision. You see exactly where you went wrong. You see the path you didn't take, and it glows like a neon sign in the dark, mocking you. This is not just memory. This is vivisection. You are dissecting your own character without anesthesia. You try to sleep, but the loop is relentless. The brain, desperate for stimulation, latches on to these negative emotions because they're the only things that feel real. It prefers the sharp stab of regret to the dull ache of nothingness. It feeds on the cortisol. You roll over, you stare at the darkness. You are trapped in a room with the one person you cannot escape, the one person who knows all your secrets, the one person who knows exactly how to hurt you. You. Let's talk about geometry. In a healthy state of mind, a room is a container, 4 walls, a ceiling, a floor. The dimensions are fixed, 10 feet by 12 feet. The laws of physics guarantee that these numbers do not change. But you are no longer in a healthy state of mind. And in the logic of the cabin, geometry is flexible. You are sitting in the same chair you have occupied for days. You look up. The ceiling feels lower today, doesn't it? Just a fraction. You wouldn't notice it with a ruler, but your primitive brain senses it. The air feels denser. It feels like you are breathing soup. You look at the walls. When you first arrived, they were protective barriers. They were shields against the chaos outside. But now they feel like the walls of a trash compactor, and the gears have just started to turn. This is the manifestation of claustrophobia. But not in the way the movies show it. You don't scream and pound on the door immediately. It is subtler than that. It is the creeping suspicion that the room is shrinking. You start to track the shadows. You become obsessed with the distance between the bed and the dresser. Was it always 2 feet, or has it shifted? You stare at the wallpaper patterns. The repeating floral design starts to look like a code. It starts to look like a grid of staring eyes. The architecture is no longer passive. It has become hostile. You begin to experience the room as a biological entity, a living organism, and you are the foreign object it is trying to digest. Listen to the house at night. Creak, groan. That isn't thermal expansion. That is the sound of the house adjusting its grip. That is the sound of the stomach contracting. You walk to the window. You want to look out to remind yourself that a world exists beyond this box. You pull back the curtain, but the glass feels cold, unnaturally cold. And for a moment you are terrified to look through it. Why? Because you're afraid that there will be nothing there, just a gray void. Or worse, that you will look out and see yourself looking in. And then your eyes drift back to the door. The door. The heavy wood. The brass handle. And the lock. Remember how satisfied you felt when you turned that deadbolt in the beginning? Click. It was a sound of power. It was a declaration of independence. Now, you look at that deadbolt and the meaning has inverted. It is no longer keeping the monsters out. It is holding you in place for the process to finish. It is the seal on the sarcophagus. You have the key. It is likely in your pocket or on the table. You could unlock it. You could walk out right now. But you don't. And this is the paradox that breaks you, the paralysis. You are terrified of the room, yet you are even more terrified of leaving it. The walls are crushing you, but they are also the only thing holding you together. If you open that door, you fear that you might simply evaporate into the atmosphere like a drop of water on a hot skillet. So you stay. You sit back down. You watch the walls, and you swear. You swear on your life. You can see them. Breathe. There is one room in the cabin that you have started to avoid. You enter it only when necessary, and you keep your head down. The bathroom. It is tiled in cold ceramic. The acoustics are sharp. But the problem isn't the room. The problem is the object hanging above the sink. The mirror. In the beginning, you used it to check your appearance, to shave, to fix your hair, to verify that you were presentable for the world. But now, there is no world. So what is the mirror for? Curiosity gets the better of you. It is late or early. The time doesn't matter. You stand before the glass. You turn on the tap, letting the water run just to create a sound screen against the silence. You slowly lift your head, and you meet the eyes of the stranger. Psychologists call this depersonalization. It is a defense mechanism. Your brain, overwhelmed by the stress of isolation, detaches your consciousness from your physical vessel. It pulls the pilot out of the seat. You look at the reflection. Intellectually, you know it is you. You know that is your nose, that is your chin. Those are the scars you have carried since childhood. But emotionally, viscerally, you recognize nothing. The face looking back is wrong. The skin is too pale, waxy, like parchment paper stretched over bone. The hair is wild, matted, a nest of static. But it is the eyes that terrify you. Look closer. The pupils are dilated, black holes absorbing the dim light. They don't look like human eyes anymore. They look like the eyes of a trapped animal. They are wide, alert, predatory, and empty. There is a phenomenon known as the Caputo effect. If you stare into your own eyes in a mirror for long enough in low light, your brain will begin to decompose the image. It gets bored with the static data of your face, so it starts to hallucinate changes. You watch in frozen horror as your reflection begins to shift. Does the mouth curl into a sneer? Did the left eyelid twitch? You didn't tell your face to do that. You are perfectly still, but the man in the mirror, he seems to be vibrating. You raise a hand to touch your cheek. In the mirror, the hand rises, but there is a microsecond of lag. Or maybe you just imagined it. But that doubt is enough to shatter your reality. A terrifying thought takes root in your mind. What if the reflection isn't a reflection? What if the glass is actually a window? And what if the thing on the other side isn't you? You lean in closer. Your breath fogs the glass. The stranger's breath fogs the glass from the other side. You are centimeters apart. You realize that you have lost the most important connection of all. You have forgotten who you are. Without the social web to hold your identity in place, you have dissolved. All that is left is biology, flesh, blood, and this haunting image. You are not alone in the cabin. You never were. You are trapped in here with him, the primitive version of yourself, the one who doesn't know how to speak,
the one who only knows how to survive. And looking into those black, dilated eyes, you realize he is slowly taking over. You turn off the light, you run out of the bathroom, but you can feel his gaze burning into your back.
And then, after the rage, after the terror, after the weeping, silence returns. But this is a different kind of silence. It is not the silence of emptiness. It is the silence of submission. You stop pacing the floor. You stop checking the lock. You stop looking at the calendar. What is the point of measuring time when time has stopped moving? You have entered the final phase of the experiment, the surrender. Psychologists who study long-term incarceration know this phase well. They call it institutionalization. It is the moment when the prisoner stops looking at the gate and starts decorating the cell. You sit in your chair. The dust motes dance in a shaft of sunlight cutting through the blinds. You watch them for hours, and for the first time in weeks, you feel calm. It is a narcotic calm, a heavy chemical sedation. You look at the walls that used to crush you. They don't look hostile anymore. They look strong. They look protective. You realize that out there, beyond the wood and the brick, is a world of pain. Out there is rejection. Out there is noise. Out there is the risk of failure. But in here, nothing can hurt you. In here, the variables are controlled. You know exactly where the table is. You know exactly how the floor creaks. You have memorized the geography of your own cage. You begin to merge with the environment. You are no longer a person inhabiting a room. You are part of the furniture. You are just another object settling into the dust. The boundary between you and the room dissolves. You find yourself whispering to the walls, not in anger, but in affection. We are safe here, you think. We don't need them. This is the psychological equivalent of Stockholm Syndrome. Your captor, the isolation, has become your protector. You have fallen in love with the void because the void demands nothing from you. It doesn't ask you to smile. It doesn't ask you to work. It only asks you to exist. The scary part isn't the hallucinations anymore. The scary part is that you are beginning to dread the sound of the phone. You flinch at the idea of a knock on the door. If someone came to rescue you right now, if someone unlocked that door and swung it open, you wouldn't run out. You would shrink back into the corner. The light would hurt your eyes. The fresh air would burn your lungs. You have forgotten how to be human. You have evolved into something else, something quieter. Something that thrives in the dark like a deep-sea creature. You close your eyes. You listen to the hum of the refrigerator. It sounds like a lullaby now, a mechanical heartbeat that syncs with your own. You are finally at peace, but it is the peace of a museum exhibit. It is the peace of a fly preserved in amber, perfect, still, and dead to the world. And then, one day, the timeline snaps back into place. Maybe the quarantine ends. Maybe the storm passes. Maybe you simply run out of food and are forced to turn the key. Click. The sound is the same as before, but the meaning has changed. The bolt slides back, the heavy wood swings open, and the world comes rushing in. You expect relief. You expect a cinematic moment of joy, music swelling, sunlight washing away the sins of the dark. But that is not what happens. What happens is violence. The sunlight hits your retina like a physical blow. It is too white, too sharp. You squint, raising a hand to shield eyes that have adapted to the cave. Then comes the sound, the traffic, the distant sirens, the chatter of neighbors. It doesn't sound like life. It sounds like a riot. It sounds like static screaming at maximum volume. Your auditory cortex, which had tuned itself to hear the heartbeat of a mouse, is now being deafened by the roar of existence. You step out onto the pavement. The air smells different. It smells complex. Exhaust fumes, cut grass, perfume, decay. It makes you dizzy. You walk among people. You see them smiling, talking, checking their phones, and you feel a profound, terrifying disconnect. They are playing the game. They are performing for the audience. But you have seen what lies behind the curtain. You have seen the raw, naked machinery of the human mind when the lights go out. You know that underneath the suits and the polite conversation, there is just a scared animal waiting to be locked in a cage. You try to speak to them. You try to reintegrate, but your rhythm is off. Your pauses are too long. Your eye contact is too intense. You are vibrating at a different frequency now. You are a ghost walking through a living city. This is the final paradox of the cabin fever. You survived the isolation. You didn't go mad. You didn't break. You endured. But in order to survive the silence, you had to internalize it. You had to swallow it. You go back to work. You go back to the parties. You laugh at the jokes. But deep down, in the quietest, darkest basement of your subconscious, the cabin is still there. The door is still locked, and a version of you is still sitting in that chair, staring at the wall, waiting for the walls to breathe. You can check out of the room any time you like, but you can never truly leave. The lock doesn't just keep the world out, it keeps the darkness in. And now, you are the carrier.